This run is cursed. Do not attempt this run. It is not worth it. There needs to be an abandoned hope all ye who enter here banner above this run. This is not a run. It's a stumble. It's a crawl. It's a dog dragging its ass across the carpet. Nothing comes easy. What you may think of as the most trivial battle in a casual run now becomes an Everest-sized problem that you have to drag the body of Shedinja over. Let this be a warning. Anyway, let's talk about Shedinja. It's a gimmick Pokemon. Shedinja only has 1 HP, and that's all it ever gets. It also has the unique Wonder Guard ability. Shedinja can only be damaged by super effective moves. In this case, that means Flying, Rock, Ghost, Fire, and Dark. Every other type of move is ineffective. However, weather effects such as Hail and Sandstorm will affect Shedinja. If we now take a look at its stats, its physical attack is pretty decent at base 90. However, its speed is not so great. There's not so much a possibility that as we progress through the game, other Pokemon will outspeed us. It's a guarantee. And we're not even talking endgame here. That youngster with his pre-evolved Pokemon can be just as much of a hurdle as any gym member. Move-wise, we're not doing too much better there either. While Shedinja does learn more moves compared to my run in Gen 4, they're still not great. Practically, our best moves are going to be Shadow Claw and X-Scissor for the stab bonus, and moves like Dig and Return in an attempt to gain some type of coverage. Some other factors that you've got to be aware of when assessing the insanity of a run like this are twofold. Number 1, XP works differently in this gen. This means that the more you level up, the less XP you'll gain from Pokemon below your level. And because Shedinja pretty much has to OHKO its opponents, grinding is going to be an absolute chore. And number 2, while Wonder Guard may have seemed awesome when it was introduced in Gen 3, it only gets worse as the gens progress. More Pokemon at lower levels have access to moves that aren't the same type as they are. This means, particularly with dark moves, you're getting completely shut down earlier and more often. So why even do this? Honestly, I thought it'd be a fun challenge. I was right about the challenge part, not so much about the fun part. Let's take a look at the rules. Number 1 is we can only use Shedinja in battle. It's a solo run after all, but we can capture other Pokemon for HM Butler purposes. Number 2 is we can't use items in battle. Held items are fine. Number 3 is that this isn't a minimum battles run. Those are the types of runs I usually do, but it's literally impossible to complete this as a minimum battles run, so we can feel free to level up if we need to. Number 4 is no saves coming. I mean, we can't save in the middle of battles for a better result. However, during the Elite Four, spoiler, I had to save Iris. This will become extremely apparent later on. And there's one final thing for those of you who haven't played Black and White 2, or Black and White for that matter, will know about the feasibility of this run. When we get there, we'll talk about that. With all that out of the way, we can start our descent into Pokehell. We start the game in Aspertia City, though that name's a bit generous. We meet up with Professor Juniper's assistant and have inserted Shedinja into the place of Snivy, because that means the rival takes a Tepic. And you bet I edited this Shedinja to give it max IVs. No way I'm resetting. We've got enough of a grind on our hands. The first rival battle is a foregone conclusion, as Hughes Tepic has no moves that are effective against us. This trend of Wonder Guard saving us continues for about 15 minutes, because once you reach Valkesi Town, you're forced to take on the School Kid trainers in Alder's house. School Kid Seymour has Pampor, and Pampor knows Bite. And when we roll in with a level 8 Shedinja, you can imagine the rest. For what is to be the first time of many, Shedinja does not outspeed its opponent. GG. So we just got to level up, right? There's no other option. And we can't take advantage, I believe, of rustling grass yet to find XP fountains like Ordino. We're stuck battling the low level Pokemon around the ranch until we can take Shedinja to level 9. Challenging the Pampor again, we've learned Sand Attack, but will we outspeed? The answer's still no. I tried this a few more times, and even though Pampor will sometimes use Leer, meaning you can get in a hit, ultimately it's gonna use Lick and you're down.
今回は僕の勝ちだね。
The question then becomes, at what level can you outspeed and beat the Pampor? Well, at level 11 we still don't outspeed, but at level 12 we do. We just don't knock out the Pampor. But at level 13 if we get into a battle with School Kid Seymour, and if we use Scratch, and then Panpour uses Leer, we can knock it out. But then we're immediately thrown into a battle with School Kid Cassie, who has a Pansear. It uses Lick, and we're KO'd. I refuse to level up further. We just need a bit of luck. Eventually, we can get it. In the first battle with Seymour, we use Scratch. Its Panpour goes for Leer. We then use another Scratch. After a quick chat, I've now watched dozens of times, we're up against Cassie. We then get the same roll of luck and are finally able to defeat the Pansear. If that doesn't tell you what kind of run we're going to have here, then I don't know what will. There's still time to turn back. We now have our very first gym leader to deal with, Cheren, your Protect pal from Black and White. Cheren's Patrat and Lillipup will be at levels 11 and 13 respectively, and they each have Bite. We can't even beat the trainers in the gym, so what are our options? Leveling up, of course. Thankfully, we need just one more level because at 14, Shedinja learns Fury Swipes. Though it has 18 base damage, we can hit multiple times. As long as we manage 3 hits or over, we're in business. The move works wonders against the trainers in Cheren's gym when you get a good roll. But we do eventually get to Cheren. First battle in, we use Fury Swipes on Patrat and get 4 hits taking it out. We just have to hope for the same luck with the level 14 Lillipup. But it outspeeds us and uses Bite.
今回は僕の勝ちだね。
And it turns out that getting the 4-hit Fury Swipes on Patrat was a bit of an anomaly too. We've got to level up some more. Finally, at level 16, I try again, and again and again and again, until finally, against the Patrat, we get a 2-hit critical Fury Swipes that ends up knocking it out. At level 16, we now outspeed the Lillipup, we line up another Fury Swipes and it hits 5 times, knocking out Lillipup, and we can finally continue. Veribank Gym is up next. Roxy has just 2 Pokemon, a Coughing and Whirlipede, and they both have moves that can damage us, Assurance and Pursuit. Shedinja's now at level 20, and thankfully, after Aspertia Gym, you get the TM for Return. And while Return is currently our most powerful attacking move, the power of Friendship is still not enough to one-shot a level 16 Coughing. Even if we are able to get some luck with Fury Swipes and the KO on the Coughing, when Roxy sends out the Whirlipede, Return is just a little ways off knocking it out. Our only option is yet more leveling to at least make sure Return can one-shot the Coughing. And at level 22, it is possible. However, what's not possible is doing the same to the Whirlipede. Outside of a crit or possible 5-turn Fury Swipes, we're just going to need some more levels. And while it doesn't affect us directly in this battle, Whirlipede and a bunch of other Pokemon have moves that either deal damage on contact or proc status ailments. In this case, Whirlipede has Poison Point, which will inflict poison about 30% of the time on contact. Doesn't really matter though when we're getting one-shot by Pursuit anyway. But we'll have an easier time than Cheren in the end. After gaining just one more level to reach 23, we can now comfortably OHKO the Coughing, then the Whirlipede, our Return is able to get another one-shot. We get poisoned on contact, but it doesn't matter because Roxy's all out Pokemon. Moving on to Castellia City, there are a number of plot points we're forced to deal with. Is it Berg, like Iceberg, or Burr, like Girder, like a tree's burr? A burr is something that sticks out of a tree, so I'm guessing the latter. Anyway, our biggest roadblock with Burr is his Dwebble. While Swadloon and Livani can't touch us, Dwebble can pinch us with moves like Smackdown and Feint Attack. When we get a taste of Dwebble along the way from one clown, even though we're 5 levels above it, our Return is just doing half damage. Of course, we then get the Smackdown.
I guess this is therapy.
So there's definitely pain in our future. We ultimately get past the Clown's Dwebble and to Burr. During the first battle, even though we don't manage to one-shot the Swadloon, we take it to Red Bar. Burr uses a Hyper Potion, little overkill, on the Swadloon eventually, but not before it gets off a String Shot. We really don't want Shedinja's already poor speed to decrease further. Burr eventually switches into the Dwebble, and when our Return connects, it's not even doing a half damage. Dwebble then hits us with a Smackdown.
I guess this is therapy.
I persist at level 25 for a few more turns, but there is light at the end of the tunnel because Burr likes to swap into Dwebble. We can get the first and second hit on it. We just need Return to reliably do over half damage. We also can't afford to get hit by String Shot either. At level 27, I try again, and while Return still isn't doing over half damage, I'm just hoping for a bit of luck to save me from grinding more levels. When Swadloon is sent out, Burr then immediately switches into Dwebble. Our return was lined up and it still does just under half damage. However, on the very next return, we score a crit. And that's it. The battle is pretty much just a matter of course now. A while back, I mentioned that those who had played either the original game or the sequel would be aware of something that would greatly affect this run. In a casual run, it's not even an issue, but in Shedinja run, it's a killer. What kills the run is Route 4 and Colress. On Route 4, there is a perpetual sandstorm. This can be mitigated by avoiding trainers with more than one Pokemon, or using repels to avoid wild Pokemon. Remember when I said that moves like Hail and Sandstorm still affect Shedinja? Well, here it is, because you are forced to battle Colress in these conditions, and Colress has more than one Pokemon. He has 2. And what sucks is that his Pokemon can't even attack us due to their movesets. And it's at this point where we just have to enter into a thought experiment. Firstly, by simply having a Shedinja, we've already broken the rules of the game. Can you beat the game with just Shedinja that you've hacked in at the beginning? Absolutely not. That's the answer. We don't have access to the only weather TM Shedinja can learn, Sunny Day. You can only get that in Mistralton City, which we can't access yet. If we could get Sunny Day earlier, this would be possible, but it's not. And I don't think anything like time of the year affects whether the sandstorm is in the area either. But by this time, I'd already invested a bunch of time into planning the run. As frustrating as it is, and as frustrating as it will definitely become, I just don't want to leave it there. So I decided to do something about it. Now, whether you think this invalidates the run further, that's up to you. That is a fair point. But we can keep this thing going in one way, by trading in a Shedinja. It's perfectly feasible to have another Shedinja with Sunny Day and trade from Gen 3 to 4, 5. Let's say we did this and kept everything the same, but basically our Shedinja now has Sunny Day. Is it possible to get through the rest of the game? Well, I decided to do that. I gave Shedinja Sunny Day because I want to see this through. If you're still on board with that, then let's keep going. So if we have Sunny Day, the battle goes like this. Against the Magnemite, we set it up turn 1. Magnemite will then typically use Thunder Wave, but it's not a problem because neither Magnemite or Clink can actually damage us. Aside from the battle taking a little bit of time, it's trivial. Now that we've essentially diverged into a parallel universe where Shedinja can still feasibly progress, we've got Nimbasa Gym up next. One thing that is immediately apparent when looking at Elisa's lineup is the fact that her Pokemon by nature are rather speedy. Not only that, but both the Emolga and the Flaffy have the static ability, which has a chance to paralyze upon contact. Even if we naturally outsped the first 2 Pokemon, if static procs, there's no way we're outspeeding that Zebstrika. The first time in, we're level 30 against a level 28 Emolga. We go for Dig even though it won't have hit anyway, but Emolga clearly outspeeds and goes for Pursuit. Yeah. What adds to the frustration in attempting to outlevel a problem is that while you can find out what your EVs or current speed are, trying to properly pin down what gym leaders Pokemon's IVs are is near impossible. There is not a list of them, but they definitely have some. And because Shedinja's speed stat is pretty terrible, you're sometimes getting just 1 or 0 points per level up. One option we do have is the Quick Claw. 20% of the time, we'll get to move first, but even if we one-shot Emolga, we definitely need it to continually proc for the rest of Elisa's Pokemon. For the 2 Pokemon, the Emolga and the Zebstrika, that is a 4% chance, and I'm terrible at maths. So that may not even be right, it could be worse. And let's not even take into account if we were paralyzed and couldn't attack. Even on the extremely rare occasion the Quick Claw does proc, we don't even one-shot Emolga. So I guess we gotta level up. We can't reliably make a dent until we're level 36 and the Quick Claw procs. Though it is a one-shot on Emolga, of course, Elisa's gonna send out Zebstrika next. And of course, that thing is gonna be quicker than us and use Pursuit. I was at this for over an hour. Out of a dozen tries, maybe you'd get the first Quick Claw proc, but the second, nah, you'd get paralyzed. But statistically, to get the 2 procs on the Quick Claw is at least 4%. And statistically, if you do something enough times, we get the Quick Claw on Emolga, we knock out a return, we don't get static. Zebstrika comes out, we line up a Dig, and Quick Claw procs again. Dig then thankfully knocks it out. Flappy's out next, Elisa's final Pokemon, we've basically won. Flappy can't touch Shedinja, so the battle's over. It's not long before we encounter a new flavour of madness, the rotation or the triple battle. For Black 2 it's the former, White 2 it's the latter, and we're on Light 2. On Route 5 you are forced to participate in this battle to progress the game. I take the stance that as long as we don't attack with our Pokemon, we can still technically call this a solo run because this is a mandatory battle. There is no good choice here, both battles are a bad choice. Each of Charles's Pokemon have moves that we're vulnerable to, and most likely a couple of them outright outspeed us. Typically when going into these battles, our Pokemon get immediately one shot. Even when a Quick Claw procs, we're intentionally keeping Shedinja to the right. We can't even knock the Sigilif out. Where do you even begin here? Well, first things first, at level 38, Shedinja can learn Shadow Sneak. While not particularly powerful, base 40 physical, it is a priority move, and Sigilif is weak to it. That's potentially one problem out of the way. However, even if you defeat the Sigilif and watch Psyduck level up 1,000 times in between, you'll then get Archon using Pluck. Instant death. So to get through this battle just took time. Basically, we can only attack with Shedinja, which means the other Pokemon in our team can't. We have an Ordino and Emolga. Ordino can use Refresh, and all we have for Emolga is Double Team. We need Shedinja on the left, Ordino in the centre, and Emolga on the right. In a successful battle, and this took forever, you want Shedinja to use Shadow Claw on the Archon. This will one-shot it. You then need Sigilif to have targeted Ordino with an attack. It does with Air Cutter, doesn't matter if it misses or not. Then this allows Shedinja on its next turn to use Shadow Sneak again to KO the Sigilif. If all that happens, we're now in a 3-on-1 situation. We want Emolga to get hit and knocked out, because it being knocked out is the only way we can get Shedinja within range of attacking. Either that, or we need Ordino to get knocked out. It doesn't matter. And I don't think using Emolga with Double Team mattered a great deal, because we could have simply used another Pokemon that was bulky enough to just withstand 2 hits. But the battle then goes on for minutes, because the Tortuga keeps trying to hit Emolga because it has effective move. As things continue, Tortuga eventually gets paralyzed. Again, this doesn't matter because it's slower than Shedinja. Shedinja will outspeed it. Eventually, I use all the double teams I have and end up just switching to wasting items because they're giving no Pokemon on the team an advantage. In the end, Emolga is eventually knocked out and we can switch up to Shedinja. But what happens next is what really matters. When Shedinja goes for Shadow Sneak, it gets a crit, and without that crit, we would have been finished. And that is the luckiest part of all of that ridiculous battle. Thank God we won't have to do another triple battle again, right? Over the bridge and we're in Driftveil here. Before we can go to the Pokemon World Tournament area and get access to some potentially decent moves, we have to beat Clay. Much like the other gym leaders, we're going to have issues. Krokorok knows Crunch and has Intimidate, so we're working with less attack. Not only that, Excadrill is super quick and it knows Rock Slide. The only saving grace here is that we now have the TM for Dig. We're at level 39. At this level, while we outspeed Krokorok, we're getting hit with that Intimidate, which means we can't knock Clay's Pokemon out. And we get crunched. If we had X-Scissor, we could probably take it out. Even in the instances we get a crit on Krokorok, Clay will then send out Excadrill. Of course it's going to outspeed us, and of course it's going to use Rock Slide to knock us out. I try again at level 43, and with that Intimidate, we still can't one-shot the Croc. While we do have the Silk Scarf that would mitigate the range without gaining some crazy levels, we're never going to outspeed Excadrill, so we have to make that sacrifice. But what would happen if Rock Slide missed? And what would happen if we used Confuse Ray? And what if Confuse didn't do anything, but Rock Slide missed again, and we used Dig? And Excadrill hit itself in Confusion? Well, even that wouldn't be enough to knock it out. Excadrill heals with a Berry. Next turn in, it hits itself in Confusion, but as we're digging, Clay uses a Hyper Potion. We end up doing decent damage against it, but the next time it goes for Rock Slide, it hits. We're just so close, so I decided to gain a couple more levels and try it again and see if we can just mitigate those damage ranges. Against level 31 Krokorok, we use Return and we know that's a one-shot by now. When Clay then sends out Excadrill, we know we're never outspeeding it, but we get the Rock Slide miss, letting us hit the Excadrill with Confuse Ray. If it hits itself in Confusion on misses, we may just have it. Shedinja goes for dig, Excadrill ends up hitting itself in confusion, we burrow underground, and while Excadrill's next move doesn't end up whacking itself in the face, when we resurface with the next dig, it hits and KOs it. Oh yeah, and Clay has a Sand Slash too. While we've not got anything effective to use against it, it can't do anything to us. After hitting it with a Confuse Ray, and then a return, Clay does end up wasting a Hyper Potion on it, but in the end, there's not much he can do, so we take the win. But the fun isn't over just yet, because we've got the Pokemon World Tournament. During this portion of the game, we do get access to some extremely useful NPCs, mainly the Move Reminder, who will be chucking heart scales at soon enough. The problem we found ourselves in here is that we do have to tackle the Driftveil Tournament. It boils down to a series of 3 consecutive battles against Hugh, Cheren, and Colress. The problem with Hugh's team isn't so much the Pig Knight or the Tranquil, but it's Simipour. I started getting flashbacks of that School Kid Seymour.
今回は僕の勝ちだね。
今回は僕の勝ちだね。
The Simipour and its lick is what's ending us. At level 45 it's not working, and at level 46 it's still not working. However, what we can do is rely on our old friend the Quick Claw to give us an advantage. With this, though it does take several tries, we finally are able to get the activation on the Simipour. Of course, that thing's knocked out, but we still had 2 trainers left to defeat. Cheren isn't going to be much of an issue, as he was in Aspertia thankfully. No way the Stoutland is quicker than us, so we can knock it out with return. He'll then send out the Watchog because it has Bite. Whether that thing was quicker than us or we just needed the activation, I don't want to know, but we go first and return one-shots it. His final Pokemon, Cincino, has nothing that it can use against us, so it's easy enough to deal with. Finally, Colress is up. When that guy can't rely on Sandstorm to do his dirty work, he is pretty ineffectual. Not one of his Pokemon have moves that are effective against us, so we can just happily sweep through them all. Before we can head to Mistralton, we have to take care of the Plasma Frigate and head through Relic Passage. But none of that is really worth mentioning. Most of the time, between gym leaders or significant battles, while you may get tripped up by a few Pokemon, it's nothing a few retries can't deal with. But believe me when I say, there are a couple of trainers out there that were driving me insane. But we'll get to them. In the events around Mistralton, we can finally pick up the Lucky Egg. Shedinja is basically going to be incubating this thing for the rest of the run. I mean, there is more grinding in this run than goes on in the private lounge of a strip club.
Tasty.
It's ridiculous. Skylar has 3 Pokemon that not only have the chance to outspeed us, but have super effective moves like Acrobatics, Assurance, Air Cutter, Air Slash. Shedinja is not in for a good time. At level 51, we go to Shadow Claw on Skylar's Swoobat and it immediately outspeeds us with Acrobatics, but we do have a fix for that, Shadow Sneak. It's capable of one-shotting the Swoobat, pretty good, but Swano's up next and that thing is fast, so fast in fact that it outspeeds us and uses Air Slash. There are several issues we are currently dealing with and I confirmed this through several dozens of retries. But the first point is we just need to be at a high level. And second is, ultimately, we can't use Shadow Sneak. I don't know why, but for some reason, even at levels where we should theoretically outspeed Swanna, whenever we'd use Shadow Sneak, there was no chance of going first against Swanna. Don't ask me why. This means that Swoobat has to be defeated, potentially, without using Shadow Sneak. A level 37 Swoobat with, I think, 16 IVs, because that's the gym leader spread in this game, has a speed of 95. Even this Shedinja, which has a good focus on speed EVs, is only really scoring in the 70s. Outside of Quick Claw, how much would we have to level this thing up to even stand a chance? To get past Swoobat and Swanna, technically, you've got to be level 55. If we use Shadow Sneak on the Swoobat, it's a KO. Then, when Swanna's sent out, if we are able to get the Quick Claw activation with Shadow Claw, we can knock out the Swanna too. And this is the first time I've seen that Skarmory. And what do we even have that can damage this thing? The answer is nothing. Shadow Claw doesn't do more than half. Skarmory uses Air Cutter and we're down. As has now become tradition, I was trying this thing again. In the end, I had to gain 10 more levels. Do you have any idea how annoying that is? Because you're just hunting for Ordino in the shaking grass, and there are times when the grass would shake, you'd go to move to the grass, but you get in an encounter along the way. Then it'd end up being a Zeb Striker. And Shedinja is so damn slow, it can't escape a Pokemon that is almost 20 levels below it. So you'd get KO'd. Cursed run. But we return at level 67, and the plan now is to keep the Quick Claw on and, hope you get an activation against the Swoobat. Then, if you knock it out, return will then one-shot the Swanna. But for the Skarmory, you basically have to use Confuse Ray and hope it keeps hitting itself in the face repeatedly. I said to myself I would never do a shiny run or anything like that because I'd find them super tedious and no fun, and then I catch a glimpse of my dead-eyed face in the window as I'm running about trying to level a Shedinja up for hours on end. Anyway, finally beating Skylar, so for Swoobat I decide to go for Shadow Sneak. As we all know, it's a one-shot. Because of the levels we've gained, when Swanna is sent out, we are not relying on the Quick Claw activation any longer because we naturally outspeed it, so Return is all we need to use. But for the Steel Flying Skamori, we have to use Confuse Ray because we've got no way of avoiding its attacks. Skamori ends up hitting itself in Confusion, we then go for Shadow Claw, and even though it's not effective, we score a crit and it knocks Skamori out. We now finally have the 6th gym badge. In Opelucid, we of course have Drayden, whose face is at least 50% beard. What is worth pointing out in the run up to Drayden is you face off with a Drudigon who has the rough skin ability. If you make contact with the Pokemon, you'll take damage to your health. While we can overcome this with a no contact move like Shadow Ball, just keep that in mind for later. Drayden has a Drudigon, Flygon, and one of my favourite Pokemon, Haxorus. All 3 of his Pokemon have moves that will end us. When looking at speed, of course, at our level, Pokemon like Flygon and especially Haxorus will run laps around Shedinja. At level 75, we are able to use Shadow Claw on the Drudigon, it has sheer force, to knock it out. But Flygon, nah, not happening. But when it's sent out, goes first and uses Crunch, it misses. That's because we had the Bright Powder equipped. While it's probably more effective to use the Quick Claw because Bright Powder only lowers an opponent's chance to hit by like 8%, I gave it a try. You know, what do you know, it worked. Haxorus, however, not a chance. It's not just the speed, but it's got Mold Breaker. That ability renders Wonder Guard ineffective. So what do we do now? We go back to Quick Claw. 2 Quick Claws in a row was a 4% chance. So what do you think 3 Quick Claw activations would be? 0.8%, less than 1%. How many tries would that take? Turns out, less than 6. Against the Drudigon, we get the activation and a critical hit with Shadow Claw. We then get it again with Flygon, and somehow, literally against the odds, we get it for a final time against Haxorus and one-shot it. I feel like I should buy a lottery ticket or something. The last gym leader, funnily enough, is not one I'm particularly worried about. Outside of his Caracosta, which has Smackdown and Crunch, we should be good with the Confuse Ray Shadow Claw combo. Wailord is tanky but slow, and we should outspeed the Jellicent. For the Caracosta, because it has Sturdy, it has to whack itself in the face. While we can eventually get it to hit itself in the face, our Shadow Claw isn't doing the rest of the work. When it hits itself again, Marlon then uses a Hyper Potion, and I'm thinking I'm gonna have to restart. But because we actually outspeed a Pokemon for a change, we're able to use 2 Shadow Balls to knock it out. When Wailord comes out, though it is tanky, we are pretty powerful, and 1 Shadow Claw is all it takes. With Marlon's final Pokemon, the Jellicent, we definitely have the speed advantage and line up another Shadow Claw for a pretty easy victory, all things considered. We've just got a couple of story beats left before we can finally face the Elite Four and get our prep out of the way. Basically, we're bringing to a close the Team Plasma storyline, and while the Frigate isn't an issue, the battle with the fused Kyurem and Ghetsis is. First of all, the Kyurem has Turbo Blaze, which can technically ignore Wonder Guard. However, Kyurem's Slash still won't affect us because of the Ghost typing. At level 88, this pretty regularly allows us to get past Kyurem, but Ghetsis is the bigger problem. If you played the original Black and White, you'll be familiar with these Pokemon and their movesets. For us, the biggest issue is the Cofagrigus because of its Mummy ability. Mummy will replace your Pokemon's ability when contact is made. And because we only have Shadow Claw right now, we're getting wrapped. But we can defeat the Cofagrigus, and can then use Dig on Electros to knock it out. It's the Hydreigon that's the problem. At level 89, by the time we get to Hydreigon, our speed ain't cutting it. I did go back and learn Shadow Ball to defeat Cofagrigus and not have to worry about Mummy, but the fact that we're lacking in the speed department once again is our downfall. Honestly, it's just a level disparity. Outside of that, our options are pretty limited, and the thing is, we're struggling with Pokemon that are like 30 levels below us. How are we supposed to deal with the Elite Four and the Champion when they have multiple Pokemon in a single battle that can outspeed us? and I wanted to do this without saving in between members. In the end, for Ghetsis, we need to raise our level to 93. Shadow Claw will effectively defeat the Kyurem without much of an issue. When we move on to Ghetsis, because we have Shadow Ball, we can defeat Cofagrigus and save ourselves from getting mummified. As we saw before, Electros can be pretty easily taken out with just one dig. When Ghetsis' Toxicroak hops along, we can use another dig to defeat it. But will we then outspeed the Hydreigon at level 93? When it's out, we go for return, and we go first, and we can knock it out. We've just got 2 Pokemon left. Ghetsis chucks out the Drapion. While it has Night Slash, we are faster and we can use Dig, just like we did for Electros and Toxicroak. Finally, there's a Seismitoad, and the reason that thing is last is because it has no move that is effective against Shedinja. Honestly, for the Elite Four, there is not a ton of prep involved. We have the majority of TMs that we'll be using. The great thing about Gen 5 is the ability to reuse TMs and the fact that the game actually gives you cool ones like Flamethrower and Thunderbolt pretty easily. It's just a shame Shedinja can't use any of them. But before we can actually reach the Pokemon League, there is literally one single trainer standing in our way. This guy, Ace Trainer Webster. His 2 Pokemon are perhaps the best at absolutely walling Shedinja. They are a Durant and a Ferrothorn. The former is basically all physical defense and speed. At level 96, Shedinja's Dig is just not powerful enough to take out the Durant. While you can equip the Soft Sand to help mitigate the range, you then won't be outspeeding the Durant at your current level. Outside of a crit, we're not beating this thing. The only way of getting past this thing is by closing the gap on those last few levels to take Shedinja to 100. At this level, we now outspeed the Durant and can KO it, thank God. But now, we just have Ferrothorn. We've got Shadow Claw. It does pretty decent damage. Could probably use a Shadow Claw to make the range. And oh god, it has Iron Barbs. So now we can't use contact moves, great. And I soon discover that Dig on the Durant is an OHKO some of the time, making this even better. I reteach Shedinja Shadow Ball, and when we finally reach Ferrothorn and use it, even with a crit, it's still doing under half damage. How do we win? Well, we need the Ferrothorn to hit itself in confusion at least 3 times, which is a 12.5% chance. And you can bet that took forever. Against the Durant, we've equipped a Ground Gem to remove the range from Dig. While we could have equipped the Spell Tag to help with the Ferrothorn, honestly, just getting past the Durant is annoying enough. Against the Ferrothorn, we obviously want to use Confuse Ray. It then hits itself in confusion. On the next turn, we can use Shadow Ball then crits, and lowers Ferrothorn's special defense. One more Shadow Ball should do it. We go first, and it does, my god. Now, we can face the Elite Four. Before taking on the Elite Four, we do have to be a little specific in the order we tackle them. This is because we've got a couple of things in the run left to chance in the battles, and we have to be conscious of the moves that we're going to have to be deleting along the way. I start with Chantal because in theory we have an advantage. At this point I've replaced Shadow Ball with Return, which means that we will knock out Cofagrigus, we get hit with Mummy. Against the Chandelure we need to be careful of its Flame Body ability, however we are still quicker than it and Shadow Claw will be a one-shot. We've then got Drifblim, and wouldn't you know it, even though we can knock it out, Drifblim has Aftermath. We're KO'd. That one is on me for not checking. But what this means is that we absolutely need Shadow Ball to make this feasible, which is, good to know. For Marshall, our biggest problem is going to be the Sork, who has Sturdy. Marshall's first Pokemon Throw, that's going to be a one-shot with Shadow Claw. For the Conkeldurr that's out next, there is a high probability that Shadow Claw will one-shot it too. Mianxiao is able to damage us, but we are faster than it and can get the one-shot. But for Sork, as we said, we have to use Confuse Ray first, and it has to then hit itself in confusion. And on the first go-around, that doesn't happen. Grimsley is perhaps the biggest hurdle because his Liepard outspeeds us and can use a move like Night Slash. The only way we're getting past it is if we've gotten a Quick Claw activation. With all this information in mind, our route through the Elite Four has been decided. It's Grimsley, Marshall, Chantal, and Caitlin. Honestly, outside of a tiny bit of luck, this is completely achievable. For Grimsley, we've taught Shedinja X-Scissor because it, along with Dig, can basically do the work for this battle. For the Liepard, we finally get the Quick Claw activation and go first, using X-Scissor to OHKO the Liepard. For the Scrafty, we can still use X-Scissor because it's our most powerful move. Crocodile is then out next, and we get hit with Intimidate. So now, will X-Scissor be enough for the one-shot? Absolutely. Now, while Bisharp is pretty quick, Shedinja is thankfully in this instance quicker. We can use Dig, avoid its attack, and then Strike, taking it out. And that is Grimsly done. On the one hand, I wish they had more Pokemon, but trying to do this in challenge mode is the path to insanity. In anticipation of the battle with Marshall, I do cheat Shadow Claw over X-Scissor because I think it should have more coverage, though I'm still not sure about that. As we saw before, Shadow Claw will one-shot the throw, and outside of a rare occasion, it'll do the same to Conkeldurr, and we even get a crit. For Mianxiao, we can serve up the same move once again, but for Sork, we absolutely need it to hit itself in Confusion, and when we hit it with Confuse Ray, it does hit itself in Confusion. The battle's ours. Marshall's defeated. Now that we have Shadow Ball and can equip the spell tag, we should be well prepared enough to defeat Chantal. Instead of using Shadow Claw on Cofagrigus, we'll use Shadow Ball to avoid Mummy. I know against the Chandelure, I'm playing it pretty fast and loose by using Shadow Claw, and honestly, I'm guessing Shadow Ball would have been just fine too. We do avoid Flame Body, and we see the Drifloon once again. With Shadow Ball, however, it's not an issue. And Chantal's final Pokemon is the Golurk. Again, that just requires one Shadow Claw. I didn't even bother showing Caitlyn before because it's such a trivial battle with our super effective moves. While Mashana is first, Caitlyn sometimes swaps into the Sigilif. At first, I was worried that we wouldn't outspeed it and we would need that swap, but it turns out somehow Shedinja is actually faster than the Sigilif. The rest of Caitlyn's Pokemon don't even really need a mention, they're just all of them. Every single one's a one-shot. But if you thought that was easy, we still have the champion Iris. And this was perhaps the most frustrating battle of the entire game. Yes, she has a Dragon team. Yes, all of her Pokemon bar one can one-shot us. A few of those Pokemon I know are going to outspeed us. But as you'll see, it gets worse, statistically worse, which is probably the worst, kind of worse. While I was able to get through the Elite Four without saving, let me just tell you, that is absolutely not happening here. No way. The very first time in with the Hydreigon, it outspeeds us and uses Flamethrower. I do then equip the Quick Claw in the hopes of getting around this, but I'm thinking about the Pokemon she is yet to send out. Thankfully, it turns out that Hydreigon is a speed tie. Half the time, we can end up going first, and if we defeat Hydreigon, Iris will send out the Druddigon next. Thank God this thing does not have rough skin, or this would be over. X-Scissor will knock it out. But then we have the Archeops, and yet, no way we are outspeeding that thing. The only way to get past that Archeops would be with a Quick Claw activation. And with that in mind, I just start trying. I don't even think about what is beyond Archeops right now. It takes forever, but eventually it does happen. We use Shadow Claw to knock it out. And by the grace of the Pokegods, Aggron is next. While it can damage us, we're obviously going to outspeed it and can use Dig to knock it out. Then Iris will send her Lapras out. This thing, while bulky, can't damage us. We can use Shadow Claw or X-Scissor, doesn't matter. We've got the time. But the killer is Iris's final Pokemon, Haxorus. It is all speed and attack, and it has Mold Breaker, and it has a Focus Band. We are absolutely done. Let's take a step back and look at what series of events would need to happen to make this battle winnable in our current state. Firstly, we need to win the speed tie against Hydreigon. Then, we need a Quick Claw activation for the Archeops. Then, we need not only a Quick Claw activation on Haxorus, it would then have to hit itself in Confusion after we've used Confuse Ray. Given all those things, I think it's like a 1% chance of it all coming together, and while yeah, technically that's higher than like 3 Quick Claw activations in a row, it hits different because you're needing to go through 6 Pokemon to do it. And trust me, I tried this for a good few hours. There was one point I came so close. I'd gotten through the Hydreigon, I had even managed to get past Archeops, I even somehow got the Quick Claw on Haxorus, but it didn't hit itself in Confusion. I was basically at a crossroads. Like, I did have one option, an option that I had avoided this entire run on principle, because I'd managed to do it in my other Shedinja run. Yeah, Gen 5 is definitely more difficult, but I'd beaten Seymour, the Forces of Nature, the Pokemon World Tournament, that Durant. The statistics were rare, but it was possible. And this final hurdle, the final trainer's final Pokemon is where I reached my limit.
I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
I had to go and get Double Team. I couldn't go on like this. Double Team can be earned by cashing in points at the Pokemon World Tournament after competing in the tournaments. While you do pick a team, you can still just use one Pokemon if you like. It's annoying, but I'd rather spend time doing that than try for that 1%. So I did. I came back with Double Team. Keep in mind, you still have to win the speed tie and get the Quick Claw activation, because it's not like it's safe to set up on those Pokemon either. But now that we have it, let's see how it goes. Of course, we need to start by winning that speed tie, and we do. For Druddigon, we can still use X-Scissor. Then when Archeops comes out, we get the Quick Claw activation, so we can knock it out with a Shadow Claw. Technically, we may now have done everything that we need to. We know how it goes with Aggron, and when Lapras comes out, all we have to do is just keep setting up those double teams because it can't attack us. Wonder Guard just blocks all of its moves. I paused for ages here, I can't remember why. I'd like to say I was dealing with the mental fallout of using Double Team to cheese the final battle, but I feel like I probably got distracted or something. Either way, I ended up using Shadow Claw, which isn't a one-shot, against the Lapras. Iris, of course, is going to heal it with a full restore, but lucky for us, our next Shadow Claw is capable of knocking it out. Finally, we have Haxorus. After a moment of deliberation, I eventually went for Shadow Claw. Haxorus's Earthquake misses, of course. It's not going to be a one-shot because of that focus band. So, if we avoid the next attack, we win. Haxorus uses Dual Chop. It misses. We use Shadow Claw, and it's over. This cursed run is finally over.
やった。勝った。やったー!
I never want to do a run like that again. To go through all that and then just double team at the end, it just rubbed me the wrong way. There's no way I'm just going to keep rolling the dice to get better luck either. It's already sucked the energy from me like a fun vampire. Is this run possible with just a Shedinja? No. Are the mandatory battles in the game winnable with a Shedinja? Technically, yeah. But it is so not worth it. No one should have to attempt to run like this. And here we are. Shedinja is a champion. It tried its best. But hey, maybe you could have made the run even easier. Like, good luck with that. Feel free to let me know. If you have an idea for an interesting run in the same style, let me know. And if you want to like and subscribe, go for it. Until next time, have a good one.